Good morning. Welcome to the UC Davis Team Research Forum. My name is Ana Lucia Cordova. I'm Strategic Initiatives Manager at the Office of Research here at UC Davis. Prasant, who is the usual host for this event, is unfortunately not available today, so I will be your host. We are very excited to see such a large crowd join us for this session where we're going to be talking about some insights for the research funding landscape at the federal level. Today we have two great speakers, which I will introduce briefly, but first I just wanted to say a few words about why we wanted to host this session. We often talk to faculty about being strategic around their research planning, the research funding planning, and we use words like getting ahead of the funding cycle or collecting competitive intelligence, learning about how programs at the different agencies are created. And so what we want to do with this presentation is give you a little bit of insight around what are some of the things that happened, the many steps that take place before you actually see an RFA from NIH or from NSF. And during that process, where are some points where you might want to get involved, either by reaching out to your program officer or your preferred sponsor, or maybe even talking to your representative, or maybe you want to go to DC and visit with some of the legislators or the sponsoring agency. But so throughout the process, there are many opportunities for you to learn about how that RFA came to be. Where are points where you might influence what some of the research areas that those RFAs are going to be targeting. And so, we want you to feel empowered to take action before that RFA so that you can take strategic steps to bolster and strengthen your funding around your research program. And so to do that, we have two speakers here today. We have Phil Harmon, who is the Director of Research at the Federal Government Relations Office at the University of California Office of the President. So Phil joined that office in 2018, so he's relatively new, I think, for some of our standards, some of us have been here for a while. And he has a long career and track record of successful work liaising with the federal government around many topics, including biotech, homeland security, defense, education, energy, information technology, and many others. He was also previously the UC San Diego Director of Federal and State Government Relations and worked for Lewis Burke Associates and Science Applications International Corporation. So he is your main contact at the Office of the President, Federal Government Relations Office. Our second speaker is local to us at UC Davis. Brandon Minto is the Federal Government Relations Director at the Office of Government and Community Relations at the Office of the Chancellor here at UC Davis. And he is responsible for building understanding, awareness, and support of UC Davis among federal elected officials, their staff, and within the federal administration. So with that, I'm going to let our speakers take on the presentation, and we ask you to start posting your questions to the chat, and then we'll get to the Q&A and discussion session after the presentation. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Anna. Good morning, UC Davis. It's a pleasure to be able to be here with you. As Anna said, I'm Brandon Mintz. I do the federal government relations here on campus. I am located in Davis. Our office is just off of campus on 2nd Street near Target in the PG&E Customer Service Center building. And then my colleague, Phil Harmon, he's actually based in DC. And as she said, he works for the system. And so just to give a little bit of context and kind of how that works. So each one of the campuses has a federal relations director for that specific campus whose job is to really advocate for those campus specific priorities and issues. And then for the system, we have a team back in DC and Phil is the director of research for that team who really help advocate on behalf of the system. And so we work closely hand in hand on all the various issues that come up, and really the campus counterparts like myself, we all feed information into the system kind of from the campus perspective to help create the narrative coming from the University of California. And so we're really excited to be here with you today. I think we have a good discussion on hand. There's been a lot going on in the last couple months. And so we're excited to bring you up to speed on some of the happenings and what that may all mean. And so I'll kick it over to Phil here for a couple introductory comments as well.
Thank you, Brandon, and really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. And thank you again, Anna, for that introduction. We'll make sure we cover everything and make sure that we are prepared to answer any questions your folks may have. So for today's presentation, we're going to give you a little bit of an update on the FY22 appropriations, which was just recently passed. And I know Brandon's going to spend a little time on that. We're going to be talking about the Investing in Infrastructure and Jobs Act, which you probably are familiar with, is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act that passed last summer. We'll pivot over to the Build Back Better plan, where it is, what's in it. And then finally, wrap it up a little bit with research priorities and themes, areas that you should be aware of that will be a priority, not only for this administration, but also Congress. And then with research security, because I think everybody is well aware this continues to be an issue for the academic community that the administration and Congress are focusing on. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Brent.
Thanks, Phil.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We are having some requests to see if we can make the slides into presenter mode so that people can see them better. Yeah, to full screen.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Bear with me.
We're good at government relations, maybe not so good at managing a PowerPoint. While Phil is getting that PowerPoint pulled up, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of start talking about FY22 appropriations. And so there's been a lot happening on this front, y'all. Last night, actually, the Senate voted to pass the FY22 budget, and it's now been sent to President Biden's desk for final signature. And hey, we finally have a budget. I guess we're kind of subscribing to the better late than never school of thought. The budget is for $1.5 trillion, and it funds the federal government through September 30th. And of note, it sends $13.6 billion in aid to Ukraine. Given everything that is going on right now with Russia and Ukraine, that definitely was a big driver in terms of the discussion affecting the budget. It includes a 6.7% bump in domestic programs, upping them to $730 billion in funding, and a 5.6% increase in defense spending, up to $782 billion. Now, it's important to put a little bit of context into this because, unfortunately, the budget that we ended up with is actually less than what President Biden had originally proposed. And the president initially had asked for a 16% increase in domestic spending and just a 2% increase in defense. But that breakdown really became untenable given the narrowly divided Congress that we have, and especially with Russia's invasion in Ukraine. And that really added a lot of impetus on the defense side, so to speak. Are we able to get those slides back up, Phil?
Not yet, sorry, I had issues.
Okay, no worries, I'm just gonna keep going. And so what we wanted to do is we kind of wanted to dive into a couple of the accounts that we think would be especially interesting to you all, and kind of talk about some of the directions that the funding is headed in terms of the some of the opportunities that'll be available. And so I'm going to start with NIH. And the FY22 budget provides $45 billion for the National Institutes of Health, which is an increase of $2.25 billion or 4.72% from the fiscal year 21 enacted level. And the agreement does include an increase of no less than 3.4% for each institute and center to support a wide range of biomedical and behavioral research. And the NIH budget really does make investment in several priority areas. And so there's $6.9 billion in funding, which is an increase of $353 million from last year for the National Cancer Institute, including $194 million in funding for the Cancer Moonshot. There is $3.2 billion, which is an increase of $289 million from last year's budget for Alzheimer's disease and related dementia research. There is $3.2 billion of funding for NIH, which is an increase of $104 million from 21 for HIV and AIDS research. And included in that is an increase of $10 million for the Centers of AIDS Research as part of the Ending HIV Epidemic Initiative. There's $25 million to implement the Accelerating Access to Critical Therapies for ALS Act. There's also an increase of $30 million to support research on maternal morbidity and mortality through the Implementing a Maternal Health and Pregnancy Outcomes Vision for Everyone, or the IMPROVE initiative. There's an increase of $50 million for research related to opioids, stimulants, and pain management. There's an increase of $50 million for health disparities research. There is $12.5 million in funding to continue firearm injury and mortality prevention research. That's definitely important to UC Davis with our Gun Violence and Prevention Center. We're certainly a national leader on that front. There's $245 million of funding made available, which is an increase of $25 million for the universal flu vaccine research. And just a couple more items on NIH I want to highlight for you all. There is $75 million of funding, an increase of $10 million from the last budget for the Include Down Syndrome Research Initiative. $59 million, an increase of $8 million from FY21 for the Office of Research on Women's Health. And there are increased investments in increasing diversity in the biomedical research workforce, including $5 million from above last year's budget that's enacted for the research centers in minority institutions, as well as an increase in $6 million for research workforce programs, an increase of $10 million as well to strengthen the Office of the CIO for Scientific Workforce Diversity. So there's a lot of investment in NIH. It's certainly one of the bigger accounts, and you can see a lot of priority areas that are being funded under the NIH account. Another really interesting thing that came out of the budget was the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, or ARPAH. And it actually, the agreement includes $1 billion to establish ARPAH. So we have a new program here within the HHS, the Health and Human Services Office of the Secretary, and this is separate from NIH. And this is the ARPAH purpose is to accelerate the pace of scientific breakthroughs for diseases such as ALS, Alzheimer's, diabetes, and cancer. And that the bill gives the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services 30 days to transfer ARPAH functions, personnel, missions, activities, and funds to any agency or office within the Department of Health and Human Services, including the National Institutes of Health. So more will certainly be coming on that front, and we'll definitely keep you guys appraised as to how ARPAH kind of ends up unfolding and what comes out of that. But that really is a great opportunity and investment from Congress. So moving on, I'm going to talk about the National Science Foundation a little bit. And the budget that was just passed provides $8.8 billion, $8.84 billion for NSF, and that's an increase of $351 million, or 4% from last year's budget. Now within that $8.84 billion is broken down to the NSF research and related activities gets $7.2 billion, and then NSF education and human resources receives $1.01 billion. And really cool out of this is the agreement, the new budgetary agreement supports a new directorate for technology, innovation, and partnerships, known as the TIP Directorate within the NIH Research and Related Activities account. And the TIP is directed to build upon and consolidate existing NSF programs and serve as a cross-cutting platform to advance science and engineering research, leading to 3 breakthrough technologies. They want to find solutions to national and societal challenges, to strengthen U.S. global competitiveness, and to provide workforce training opportunities for the development of a diverse STEM workforce. Now, within this, NSF is encouraged to remember that when funding projects within the TIP, that good ideas and high quality research are not bound to certain geographical areas, but exist across the country. So they want to make sure that they're able to kind of spread that wealth across the United States, if that makes sense. And so some other priority areas within NSF funding that we want to highlight for you include there's $900 million in funding for climate science and sustainability research through the U.S. Global Change Research Program and Clean Energy Technology. There is $636 million for artificial intelligence research, including workforce and education partnerships. There is $220 million for quantum information science research. $22 million for the Historically Black Colleges and Universities Excellence in Research Program, also known as the HBCU EIR program. $40 million for the Innovation Corps program, $249 million for major research equipment and facilities construction. So that could be important if there are new equipment needs or a new building or lab or something that needs to be built, then that funding would be available for that. But $249 million does really go pretty quickly. And then $76.25 million for mid-scale research infrastructure. So a lot of investments coming forward through NSF, and there should be a lot of opportunities forthcoming therein. Moving on to the Department of Energy, the bill provides increases for both the Department of Energy Office of Science as well as ARPAH. DOE's Office of Science would receive a 6% increase to $7.457 billion, and ARPAH would receive a 5% increase to $455 million. The budget also provides not less than $120 million for artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities across the Office of Science programs, and no less than $245 million for the Office of Science's coordinated and focused research program in quantum information science, including not less than $120 million for research and $125 million for the 5 national quantum information science research centers. Furthermore, the agreement provides $2 million for collaboration with the NIH within the department's data and computational mission space, and it also supports the House Appropriations direction on traineeships for underrepresented communities. And some actual language from the committee. I'm going to quote them here, quote unquote, the committee supports the department's efforts to diversify the nuclear physics research community by offering research traineeships to underrepresented communities pursuing STEM undergraduate degrees. The committee encourages the department to especially recruit undergraduate students from historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutions, tribal colleges and universities, and Asian American and Pacific Islander serving institutions. The department is directed to provide to the committee not less than 90 days after enactment of this act, a briefing on its effort, data on students' socioeconomic status, race, or ethnicity, and recommendations on how to expand this program across the Office of Science and more broadly across the department. So I just want to take a quick second to pause on that and really, for the University of California, that's especially important. UC Davis is an Asian American and Pacific Islander serving institution, and we are very, very, very close to becoming a Hispanic serving institution. Some of our sister colleges are already there within the UC system. All of the campuses are Asian American and Pacific Islander serving institutions. So really this does present a robust opportunity, not just for UC Davis, but across the UC system. And lastly, on FY22, I just want to touch on NASA a little bit. The bill provides increases from last year's budget levels to many priorities for NASA, including $7.614 billion to its Science Mission Directorate, which is an increase of 4.29%, $880.7 million to the Aeronautics Research Directorate, which is an increase of 6.27%, and $54.5 million to the Space Grant Program, which is an increase of 6.86%. The bill provides $1.1 billion to space technology, which represents flat funding from FY21 enacted levels, unfortunately. But within the Aeronautics Research Directorate, the joint explanatory statement provides NASA with $7 million to work with universities who have strong capabilities in aviation, aerospace structures, and materials testing and evaluation. So there's a lot of opportunities forthcoming in the budget that was just passed, and I think it's important to pause and just take a little bit of an accounting of that. It should really open up some of the new funding opportunities within NSF, NIH, and some of those agencies. And given the political dynamic, we have midterms coming up in November. There's a lot of prognosticating happening on that front and concern that there may be a shift in the political dynamic whereby the Republicans might take control of the House, possibly the Senate. And so that could mean that future budgets might be impacted, that we could be operating on this budget for a while. Like we saw a continuing resolution that extended last year's budget up until this point, and we had been working off of last year's budget until this new budget just passed. And so that might be the paradigm that we're operating under for a little bit here as we work through the politics of this next election and see how things shake out. But there are some good investments, not as much as we had initially hoped for from the president's original budget proposal, but certainly some increases in accounts of interest across UC. And moving on from the budget that is just passed out of the House and the Senate that the president's about to sign, we also want to talk a little bit about the Investing in Infrastructure and Jobs Act.
Okay, Brandon, if I could jump in here.
Please, sorry.
Just a little color commentary, just to reinforce Brandon's points about the funding. And, you know, you can see everything is going up. It's not as ideal as we wanted, but keep in mind, this is, I think, incredibly important for you, and also disappointing is the fact that we are now just getting the FY22 appropriations bills signed into law. This is not the beginning of the federal fiscal year. The federal fiscal year begins October 1st. So we are 6 months into the fiscal year, and Congress is finally passing an appropriations bill and sending it to law. This is an absolute nightmare for program managers at the agencies. Because why? Because they've got 6 months to obligate this money. Now, while it's a nightmare for program managers at the agencies, there is benefit for you as researchers, because these program managers got to obligate this money as soon as possible. And we see two ideal tranches that I think you should identify and think about. One, if you have a relationship with a program manager and you're currently funded, please reach out to them, especially if you're funded by the National Science Foundation. They are going to be using, because they've done this before, and you might have experienced this in previous fiscal years when they get late appropriations, they are going to use rapid grants and they are going to use supplementals to get the money out the door sooner rather than later. Now that's low-hanging fruit for you if you are funded by the National Science Foundation. Why? Because if you're not familiar with these, the rapid grants and the supplementals are not full-blown proposals. All you need to do is you have those conversations with your program managers, develop some short white papers. They usually are not expected to be long, they're not supposed to be long. Work that out with your program manager, and in case of NSF, you can get up to 20% of the value of your grant, and that money can move very quickly. So Brandon and I strongly encourage you to have those relationships with your program managers. NIH, that you can do them. I think there are going to be a lot more opportunities for administrative supplements. So please have those conversations with your program managers about how you can explore rapid grants, how you can explore supplementals, because in a way, this makes their job a heck of a lot easier to obligate the money sooner rather than later and get it out the door, because they're going to be under tremendous pressure to get the money out the door. The other tranche of money will be what I would consider what they have been planning to do for the past 6 months, but have been unable to do. And that is what they've been thinking about for the past 6 months, which is what they've been proposing in their FY22 appropriations bill. So those could potentially be some big ticket items. Will it be all the big ticket items that they had planned? No. But we've been at FGR, Federal Government Relations, we have been working, and we've been working with your research and development officers. We've been working with your Federal Government Relations officer, with Brandon, and across all the other campuses, to identify a handful of those big ticket opportunities, or those sort of sweet spots for a handful of agencies. Depending on the interest in those opportunities, we will set up meetings with your research and development officer and with Brandon to learn more information, to suss out more information from those program managers, and then share that information with you, because the whole goal is for you to be better situated for when these solicitations are released. Better intel you have, the better position you are to win these solicitations. So again, it's not an ideal situation. Would we prefer that they pass these appropriations bills on time? Of course. I don't remember that. I think it was 1998, or if not earlier, the last time Congress passed all 12 appropriations bills on time. But this is a good opportunity for you, and based on your relationship with these program managers, to at least go after that low-hanging fruit and to better position yourselves for these upcoming solicitations, because this money is going to be moving very fast. Back to you, Brent.
Thank you, Phil. No, that's a very important context. And I actually should have also mentioned too that earmarks, or they're now called community project funding, member-directed community project funding, have come back, and they were included in the FY22 budget. And I'm very happy to say that UC Davis was successful in receiving 2 earmarked projects in the spending bill. One was sponsored by Congresswoman Matsui, and that's for $1.7 million for a digital health equity program at UC Davis Health. And another one was sponsored by Congressman John Garamendi for $1 million for a future pandemic preparedness and rapid response institute. So some great opportunities coming out of that. Earmarks will be continuing in FY23. We are still waiting guidance from the committees in terms of the accounts that they're wanting to fund and the programs that they're looking for. And as soon as we get any intel, we're going to be passing that on to the research community for your edification and for solicitation of any project ideas. So please stay tuned for that.
And Brandon, you should remind me, so we're talking about FY22 appropriations, which again is 12 months late. We're fully expecting the FY23 budget request to be coming out anytime now. And so that's obviously another sort of pressure point where we're going to identify what the administration, what these agencies are planning, share that information so you can be better prepared for when these solicitations come out.
And it will be really interesting when the president's budget request comes out for FY23, because that'll definitely give us perspective and insight into what the administration is thinking, where they're wanting to go. And that certainly starts the discussion surrounding next year's budget. And we're already a little bit behind in the timeline. Normally, we're deep into FY23 appropriations at this time of the year. And so we're still waiting for the deadlines from the committees, from our members, and certainly it all kind of starts with the president's budget request. So there will 100% be more coming on that front. So moving on, we want to talk a little bit about the bipartisan infrastructure bill that passed at the end of last year, or the Investing in Infrastructure and Jobs Act, as it is formally titled. And there are some opportunities for research and development in this bill. Now, most of the money is headed towards, the traditional concept of infrastructure, your roads and bridges, broadband internet, clean water, a lot of those types of things. But there are a number of programs that we think would be of interest to the university community that do provide funding available for you all. And so a couple examples of those that we want to talk about. So there's $21 billion in Office of Clean Energy demonstrations available. And so these are programs that are designed to fund demonstration projects that test and validate different technologies. And there's a whole slew of different topic areas within that. And so examples would be demonstration projects that test and validate technologies that reduce industrial emissions, or technologies that improve energy storage, or technologies that demonstrate promising long duration energy storage, ones that establish carbon capture programs, ones that demonstrate energy improvement in rural areas, and ones that provide clean energy projects on current or former mining land. And we encourage you, Phil and I do, to check out the website where all of this information is kind of brought together. It's build.gov. And you go in there and you can actually do a search. And if you just type in research, you will be surprised at the bevy of opportunities that will come up. And what's really neat is they give you forecasting of when that funding opportunity might become available. So for the clean energy demonstrations, it's actually pretty varied, and some of them, they give you a to be determined. They don't have an idea yet insofar as the timeline. Some of them say that applications will be opening in the summer of 22. Some say the fall, some say 2023. But those opportunities all will be forthcoming. And if you check out the website build.gov, you can kind of play around, look through them, and see specifically for any one of those. Like, say you were interested in the improving energy storage, you could look that one up and see that it's supposed to be for, summer of 22, for example. There is a lot of funding, $8 billion for regional clean hydrogen hubs. And so the purpose of those is to support the development of at least 4 regional clean hydrogen hubs that will improve clean hydrogen production, processing, delivery, storage, and end use. And so they're looking for projects that demonstrate the production, processing, delivery, storage, and end use of clean hydrogen through regional clean hydrogen hubs, which they're defining as networks of clean hydrogen producers, potential clean hydrogen consumers, and connective infrastructure located in close proximity. And applications for the clean hydrogen hubs will be opening in the summer of 22. There's funding for carbon storage, validation, and testing at $2.5 billion. And for that, they're basically looking to establish a program of research, development, and demonstration for carbon storage. And specifically, they're looking for the development of new or expanded commercial large-scale carbon sequestration projects and associated carbon dioxide transport infrastructure, including funding for the feasibility, site characterization, permitting, and construction stages of project development. And so for their timeline on that, they're estimating that applications will open in the second quarter of 2022. So in the second quarter of this year. There's money in the bipartisan infrastructure bill for geothermal research and development, and $84 million. And for that, they're really looking to support a program of research, development, demonstration, and commercial application for enhanced geothermal systems. And so they're looking at like reservoir stimulation, drilled, non-simulated, i.e. closed loop reservoir technologies, reservoir characterization, monitoring and modeling, and understanding of the surface area and volume of fractures, stress fracture mapping, including real-time monitoring and modeling. They're looking at tracer development at 3- and 4-dimensional seismic imaging and tomography. They're looking for well placement and orientation, for long-term reservoir management, drilling technologies, methods, and tools, improved exploration tools, zonal isolation, and understanding induced seismicity risks from reservoir engineering and stimulation. And so they're estimating that those applications will open in the second quarter of 2022. There's also a number of transportation opportunities, and the University Transportation Center program, that's especially important to UC Davis. We have one of the 5 national transportation centers located over at ITS. We have the National Center for Sustainable Transportation located here at UC Davis. And the funding in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, it outlines plans for the UTC, the University Transportation Center program, and it specifies cybersecurity implications of connected vehicles, connected infrastructure, and autonomous vehicles in other areas. So cybersecurity is really going to be a big emphasis moving forward in that transportation space with all of the autonomous vehicles and connectivity that we're seeing. And they're funded at $95 million for FY22 through FY26. And currently they had been funded at $75 million a year. So this would be an increase of $20 million a year. There's also money, $132 million for research, development, demonstration, and deployment projects. And that provides funding to assist innovative projects and activities that advance and sustain safe, efficient, equitable, climate-friendly public transportation. Eligible research and demonstrations under this program explore novel approaches to improve public transportation service, especially for transit-dependent individuals. It advances vehicle and system technology for safety, energy efficiency, and operational performance. And they're using data to try and enhance insights and undertake other activities that help transit agencies meet equity, safety, climate change, and transformation goals for a safer, environmentally cleaner, socially just, and connected public transportation system. There isn't a date that they have available. They give us to be determined in terms of when that funding might become available. But that's another opportunity for transportation. And these are really helpful too, because you kind of see the direction that they're wanting to go. So a lot of these different programs that they're funding really do provide insight into some of the overarching big picture thinking. And you see a lot of these recurring themes coming out of some of these funding bills. And lastly, I just want to touch on ARPAH was authorized through the Investing in Infrastructure and Jobs Act. And the bill basically authorizes the establishment of an advanced research projects agency for infrastructure, ARPAH, to fund research and development on advanced transportation infrastructure technologies through grants, contracts, and cooperative agreements. ARPAH will employ program directors to oversee these projects. It encourages the director of ARPAH the bill does to seek opportunities for partnering with minority serving institutions. So that's important for University of California, UC Davis, as well as with University transportation centers, also important for us to accomplish the goals of ARPA-I. And one thing though, is that while the legislation creates ARPA-I, it does not provide funding. And so there is still a disconnect there, and UC Federal Government Relations and all campus counterparts, we're all working to build support for funding in future budget requests and annual appropriations. So we do want to see investment in ARPA-I and the opportunity for that type of research to flow to our campuses. And
just to reinforce the data you've been, opportunities you've summarized, Brandon, this is just, as Brandon mentioned at the beginning, this is just a taste. If you go to build.gov and you put in research under the matrix, when you scroll down, you would be shell-shocked at the number of opportunities, because I was. Even though Brandon and I read the bill, when you dig deep and you look at the build.gov, there are a lot of opportunities. And we're talking over $30 billion of opportunities that are either related to infrastructure research or climate research. And, there's opportunities at DOE, opportunities at DOT, opportunities at Department of Commerce, EPA. Great opportunities. Now, I will put the caveat in here that most of these, if not all of these, are applied research. That does not preclude our community from going after them, but it's not quite the sweet spot that we normally would play in that basic research side. Nevertheless, as everyone here knows, your campus has a significant amount of expertise in all of these areas and could be very competitive. So please check it out. And then one last point on the RI. As Brandon mentioned, we are working, we advocated for it to be authorized. We would have preferred there was some money, but I still think it's still a success that it was authorized, because now the Department of Transportation can begin the process of establishing the office, of working to get appropriations in future years. But what we are doing, what I'm doing working with Brandon, is to better position the University of California for how ARPA-I is designed, and what kind of research that they conduct, so that we can be better positioned for when those solicitations come out, and what kind of research is doing. Back to you, Brandon.
Okay, so you've heard about the Build Back Better plan, and we just want to make sure we touch based on that, so that we're all on the same sheet of music. This was President Biden's signature domestic policy that he wanted to push through, and it was connected to the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And the idea is the bipartisan infrastructure bill would focus on the kind of traditional roads and bridges types of infrastructure, and the Build Back Better plan would focus on the more kind of societal infrastructure and some of the more social programs. This legislation is on life support. It was not able to pass out of the Senate. This was what was going to be done through reconciliation. And so that was the budgetary process whereby they could pass a budget, they could pass funding, essentially without having to get bipartisan support. And so it would have allowed the Senate with 50 votes +1, plus the vice president acting as a tiebreaker, to essentially pass a budget, not having to work on any compromises with the other side. And unfortunately, the Build Back Better ran into some big hurdles, and specifically, the Democrats were not able to get all of the members of their Senate caucus on board with the legislation. Senator Manchin was the most noteworthy opponent of it, and he cited a number of issues for his reason to opposing it, but one of the top ones was inflationary pressures in the country, and certainly recent times since the end of last year, this last couple of months, have not helped on that front. And it really is not looking very likely at all that we'll be able to see Build Back Better pass. President Biden, in his State of the Union address, actually stopped referring to it as Build Back Better and started using some different language to describe the bill. And it's possible that some of the specific initiatives within Build Back Better could pass kind of as separate or standalones, and that we might get some funding, but the package in its entirety as it was originally envisioned really seems dead on arrival with the current politics. And a couple of points of interest we just wanted to flag. So in R&D, there was $1.5 billion for NSF for the new directorate. The Office of Science for DOE had $700 million. There was a lot of R&D infrastructure for NSF, $700 million, $200 million for the MSIs, which is important to UC, as we talked about. For DOE, there was $5 billion for the DOE labs, and UC has a lot of interaction and engagement with the labs. There was a lot of climate change money, $500 million for NSF, $365 NASA, $500 million for NOAA, and another $1 billion for DOE energy efficiency and renewable energy. So we did a lot of advocacy around Build Back Better. We're certainly dismayed that it doesn't seem to have much political life right now. There was a lot of good investments in it, but I think some positive takeaways are we know that there is an appetite for some robust investment in a lot of these critical programs that we look to. But we'll have to continue to work through the politics and the budgets as we move forward. So as of now, not looking like we're going to see Build Back Better.
Yeah, and just to reinforce Brandon's point, if there is anything that gets across the finish line, it'll be a lot smaller. And so, we're hopeful that whatever it does, if something does, again, low percentage, but if something can get across the finish line, we're less optimistic about the research and development, infrastructure, but we're hopeful that at least we can protect the climate change research and development, just because that seems to have at least support across all 50 United States senators that would support the legislation and get it across the finish line. But Brandon and I, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears trying to get this thing across the finish line, but we refuse to take no for an answer, and so we'll continue to advocate for it. So with that, I wanted to sort of touch on the research priorities and themes. And so I think over the past several minutes, you've gotten a flavor from not only what is in the appropriations bill, what is in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, what is in Build Back Better. It gives you a little bit of a flavor of what they're thinking about, what are priorities, not only for this administration, but also with Congress. And you certainly see right from the very beginning, climate change, funding across all science agencies, National Science Foundation, NOAA, NASA, EPA, Department of Transportation. You are seeing a laser-like focus from this administration. In fact, since the very beginning, day one, they have made climate change one of their 4 pillars that they believe should be prioritized. So I think we've seen it not only with the budget request, we're seeing the support come from Congress, which is great. And I do believe, as Brandon has touched on, you have the expertise on the campus for these opportunities. So I think you're going to be in a good position to go after these opportunities now that FY22 Appropriations is signed into law, and with those bipartisan infrastructure opportunities out there. Climate change is a great opportunity for us. The other one is youth-inspired research and applied research. Brandon mentioned the new NSF Directorate. That is the focus of the new NSF Directorate, the Technology Innovation and Partnership Directorate. They're going to be funding innovation partnership fellowships, and they're going to be funding regional innovation accelerators, of course, with additional money. They're going to be funding applied research or youth-inspired research related to emerging technologies. And of course, EERE was a very big winner in FY22 appropriations with a record increase compared to FY21. And then ARPAHs. You've seen a lot of focus on ARPAHs, not only in the FY22 appropriations and the FY22 budget request. This is a focus of this administration. They're funding now for ARPAH. We've seen, as Brandon mentioned, the ARPAH-I has been authorized. There'll be funding in the future for that. The administration tried to create an ARPAH-C for climate. Congress wasn't too excited about that because they felt that there was already ARPAH-E at DOE. But we're also seeing, because of the significant presence of agricultural research on your campus, we're finally seeing funding for AGARDA, which is the USDA's their version of ARPAH. So again, the focus of these ARPAHs are more in the youth-inspired research, applied research. Again, is that our sweet spot? No. But will we be competitive? Absolutely. Should we go after these opportunities? You bet. Another area, emerging technologies. This is not new to you. You've seen it. It's got plenty of coverage. Microelectronics, next 5G, AI and quantum, These are the sexy research projects that are, or sexy research focus areas that are certainly taking place across the federal agencies. That's not going to change. Those areas will continue. If there, I would say, if anything, you know, certainly AI and quantum are getting a heck of a lot of attention, getting a heck of a lot of investments. But I do believe not only this year, but in the future years, you're going to see a lot more investments in microelectronics and next 5G. And in fact, on the microelectronics, and I'm going to touch on it a little bit, the CHIPS Act, which has been attached to the United States Innovation and Competition Act and the COMPETES Act. There are $52 billion in there for the CHIPS Act, which is focused on microelectronics. Now, that's not all for research, but $4 billion of that will be going to the Department of Defense for research. And I know your campuses have the expertise there. I think it's going to be a good opportunity to go after that funding, but I do anticipate not only the funding that is included in CHIPS, but there's going to be a lot more money, not only in the Department of Defense, but also the Department of Energy and the National Science Foundation. We've had conversations with both DOE and NSF, and they're planning to make some significant investments in microelectronics. Next 5G definitely is going to be a priority. NSF is putting some money in that. I think we should be fully expecting to see more investments in that area. Finally, multidisciplinary, multi-agency research. Again, you're seeing it across the board. Think of the NSF AI Institutes, which there's one at UC Davis. Think of that model and then cut and paste it for many of the other emerging technology themes. I think you're going to see potentially that model funded from the National Science Foundation, focused on climate change research, because we've been having conversations with the National Science Foundation, not only about what they plan to do in FY22, but the idea we've been encouraging them to not only fund existing grant or individual grants, but also to follow that NSF AI Institute model, which is cost share it, not meaning we would cost share, but cost share it with other agencies to put more money in, to work with, collaborate with other agencies to develop more research opportunities that our universities and such as UC Davis could be competitive. And finally, of course, SBE, social, behavioral, and economic. I think you're seeing a lot of an SBE flavor in every opportunity, especially at NSF, where there can be that multidisciplinary, multi-research initiative. So that's a lot there, but I think you get the gist of the theme. You know, these themes are not only the priority of the administration, but what we've seen from Congress, not only via the appropriations, but also in authorization language, in hearings, in testimony, in presentation from members of Congress. They like these things. So I think that we're going to see for the foreseeable future, budget requests and appropriations follow these things. And I do believe, you know, if you have expertise in these areas, if this is your sweet spot, you're going to be in a good spot. So pivoting over to research security, I think everybody is well aware that this continues to be an issue for the academic community. And I would say that, and I think Brandon would say the same, this has been something that we've had to do and spend a fair amount of our time on for the past several years. And it's taken up quite a bit of bandwidth for us, because I would say that we've been dealing with an aggressive administration, previous administration. The current administration continues to believe it's an issue and certainly continues to be a priority for Congress. But I would say that, and I stress it in this document, this is a bipartisan concern. It's not just one side of the aisle. Both sides of Congress, both parties believe that this is an issue that the academic community needs to do more for research security. However, I would say this, the level of effort that we have done, not only internally, but also in our communications with the administration, both administration, and with this Congress and previous Congress, we've made a heck of a lot of headway. We've made, and not only have we as a community increased our security protocols, but I think we've convinced the administration and Congress that we have also increased our security protocols. But what we have stressed, not only with the administration and with Congress, is that yes, we will increase our security protocols, but not at the expense of academic freedom. You must maintain the principles of academic freedom. And so that was a bit of a hard fight for a little while, but I think we've made progress. We've convinced them, they understand. I would say if there was any theme that we've heard most from DC when it comes to what they want us to do, it's disclose, disclose, disclose. They want to know, they want to make sure that we are providing any conflict of interest or conflict of commitment issues. And I think that we have those procedures internally. You're certainly starting to see those requirements from the agencies, but we're trying to make sure that they, the administration, the agencies, and the Hill do not get too aggressive, do not impede upon the academic freedom. It's not ideal, but I do believe we found at least a balance for the foreseeable future. But we still got a lot of work to do because we continue to see more aggressive proposals from Congress and sometimes from the agencies, but we continue to push back. I think we've improved those relations. We've improved our relationship, especially with the law enforcement, although there's still work there. But I would say that the law enforcement is better than it was about 2 years ago. But I think what we're going to be watching for in the near future is the implementation of the NSPM 33 guidelines, which came out of OSTP, and how the agencies implement it. And then, of course, watching for Congress and any additional legislation, because we certainly will continue to see that. Even though we're making progress, we know that we're going to start seeing more and more of those proposals because there's still sectors that don't believe that we're doing enough. So just to give you a flavor of some of the research security legislation that's active, you're probably well aware that the Senate last summer passed the United States Innovation and Competition Act. It's great. It authorized significant money for the National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, but it has a number of problems in the bill. It has, when it comes to research security, one, it requires NSF to collect true copies. Two, it requires NSF to develop a report and share it with Congress about what areas of research, sensitive areas of research, to include possible restrictions. Another is a requirement, if you've never heard of CFIUS, it's called the Committee on Foreign Influence in the United States, which normally assesses commercial agreements, but there is language in the USICA that would require CFIUS to review agreements between academic institutions and foreign entities valued at 1 million or more. And finally, if you're familiar with the Section 117 issue, this is where we as institutions are required to disclose any foreign agreements, contracts, or gifts valued at $250,000 or more per year. This provision lowers that threshold to $50,000 a year, and then also requires institutions of higher education to create a database that identifies every single penny that a faculty or staff receive from a foreign entity. So we are working very hard as a community. Brandon and I are working very hard with our community to talk about with our friends on the Hill and relevant stakeholders to strike these provisions in the final conference agreement. That's the Senate bill. The House bill, which passed just a couple of weeks ago, the America Competes Act, does not include the NSF collection, does not include the NSF report, does not include the CFIUS review, but it does take a similar attack with the Section 117 threshold requirement, or threshold and database. However, it's a bit different and not as severe. It does lower the threshold from 250K to 100K. And then it also still requires us to create a database that identifies individual contracts and grants to our faculty and staff, but that threshold is 50K. Now, keep in mind, this database may not be that bad because from what I understand, talking to a number of campuses, that the contracts and gifts that we receive from foreign entities go to the institution and not to the individual. If that's the case, then the database doesn't become a problem. Now, do we prefer the 250K threshold for the reporting requirements? Of course. But we understand, again, getting back to the previous slide, this has a bipartisan flavor where they kind of want to know exactly where we're giving our gifts. So we sort of take it as a win that if we can hold firm on the 100K, that's not as bad. Does it create an administrative burden? Yes. But can we live with it? We'll have to. But Brandon and I, working with our community, are going to be working with those stakeholders. We're already having those conversations with relevant committee staff and relevant members that are going to be in a position to negotiate these two bills to make sure that whatever innovation bill comes out is as clean as possible when it comes to research security. And we feel optimistic. Brandon and I, we're glass half full kind of guys. And so we're hopeful that this will be clean legislation.
And this
Now,
isn't just, sorry, Phil, just to
No,
jump in
ahead.
real quick. Just UC working on this. We're having active conversation engagement with AAU, with APLU. And I think it is important to just reiterate Phil's point that this really isn't, you know, a partisan witch hunt. It's not just coming from one side. There's universal agreement that, you know, this is something to be looked at. And I think where we're trying to influence this process is, you know, okay, understanding that, you know, what's the endpoint look at, and what does it look like? And I think that there is recognition amongst Congress that, you know, the strength of our research enterprise is based in the foundation of being open, of being able to share. And so how do we continue to maximize those strengths while at the same time, you know, making sure that we're not being taken advantage of? And so this is a really important issue, something that we've been working very closely on within the higher education community, and are going to continue to stay tuned in and push on. So I'm optimistic, you know, whatever comes down the pipe won't be too bad.
Agreed. And lastly, this is actually new news here. So we mentioned the House FY22 Intelligence Authorization Act had a provision in there that would require background checks on our researchers that are doing unclassified research. This is, as we mentioned in the previous slide, we're making progress. You know, we still see these provisions, but we're making a progress educating Congress and helping them understand that we are taking it seriously, but a balance must be achieved. That provision, this Intelligence Authorization Act, was attached to the conference agreement, was attached to the Omnibus Appropriations Bill, and that provision was not included. The House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence dropped that provision because they were convinced that we were doing good work and didn't need to have additional security protocols. So we put a lot out there. Happy to answer any questions you may have. Thematically, getting to what Anna was mentioning at the very beginning, this is a great opportunity with this soon-to-be signing of the FY22 appropriations bills to have those relationships with your program managers, if you know them, so we can work with Anna and with Brandon to better position for you when the solicitations come out. Before these solicitations come out, I think we will be in good shape because there's going to be a lot of good opportunities out there. And, you know, frankly, thematically, again, getting to what Anna was mentioning at the very beginning, you know, even if you don't have existing grants, or even if you are hesitant to work with certain agencies, don't, because they are looking to fund you. They are looking for opportunities to fund. Yes, some agencies are a little harder than others. NIH is incredibly hard, but NSF can be very competitive, can provide a lot of funding opportunities through those rapid grants, different solicitations. And, you know, one of the agencies that I hope that you will consider looking at is the Department of Defense. It's a completely different animal, but there's a whole lot of research taking place on every single one of those areas that I mentioned in that slide deck, focused on research that I think that you can be incredibly competitive for. But, you know, in many cases, it's just a matter of emailing these program managers, looking for these solicitations and having those conversations, because you can be in a good position. And especially, I know I'll beat the drum on this one when it comes to Department of Defense. Department of Defense is a different animal compared to NSF and NIH, which is so peer reviewed. When it comes to Department of Defense, yes, they fund the best research, but it is very relationship driven. So if you build that relationship with that program manager at the Department of Defense, and he likes what you're doing, you're going to be in a heck of a lot better position to continue to get funding from his or her program. So I know that was a bit of a digression, but Brandon, I don't know if you have any other additional thoughts before we
I've just been kind of scrolling through some of the questions, and so just a couple points on that. There was a question about the Garamendi earmark, and so I shared with Ana Lucia a one-pager that we wrote up that basically describes that project, and I asked her to share it with you all. There was also a question about some of the specific funding items that we discussed in FY22 appropriations. So I also sent off all of those data points to Ana Lucia to get to you all. Let's see, Isaac asked about DoD funding, and Isaac, I actually responded in the chat to your question on that one. It looks like Richard Micklemore, you're wanting to talk about agricultural research. I can give a quick update on the FY22 appropriations for ag if that's helpful.
Yes, please. I mean, you didn't mention ag at all throughout.
I didn't, and you know, we're the top ag school in the world, and so that, you know,
Exactly.
is probably
So,
a faux pas on my part. But
there was talk of an ARPA ag. I think it was the senator from Colorado was promoting this a couple of years ago, and then COVID came along, so it got sidetracked. So where is all that now?
AgARPA has been funded, or I mean, it's going to launch. Congress gave it some money to get it started.
In which bill?
FY22.
Okay.
I can share some information with you, Richard, on some activities we have as part of the consortium for EPI response for food biosecurity, and there's some activity that we're doing with the University of Colorado and other land grant universities. So I have some information that I can share with the group.
Brandon, do you have anything to expand on?
I'm trying to look for the numbers for ARPA ag.
It's small. It got $1 million.
Yeah, that's what it is, 1 million. And so basically they say the joint explanatory statement includes 1 million to further build out the planning and management structure of the Agricultural Advanced Research and Development Authority to hire its staff. So they are getting it up and running. There's kind of some initial seed funding. There is also some money for the Secretary of Ag to enter into agreements with the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine to undertake a human health study.
So no money for research at this point.
There's a NEFA increase, and so that's going to go to research. Let's see.
I think, in getting to your point, Richard, for the AgARPA, I think the rationale from Congress is show us that you are taking this idea seriously. Show us that you have plans for launching this new agency before we actually pour real money into it. So I think Congress's rationale is show us that you're planning for it properly, because I think that there has been some criticism in the past whether or not USDA was serious about it, because the AgARPA didn't come from USDA; it came from Congress
historically, USDA has not been very good at basic research. Yeah, which is why they're pushing much of this into NSF.
So there's 1.56 billion for NEFA. Let's see, 556 million for extension, and 445 million for AFRI.
That's a big increase for NEFA then.
Yeah, a 4.25% increase from FY21.
So we are practically out of time. We really thought that we were going to get through the presentation really quick but there's a lot of information here. So what our team is going to do at Office of Research is we're going to make the recording available. We're going to follow up with Brandon and Philip and maybe come up with a bullet pointed summary of some of the conversation and the opportunities for you to more easily find the information that you need. I am going to strongly suggest that people reach out to Meg Sparling, sign up for the Funding Opportunities newsletter that comes out every week. And we will try to release some of this information through that too. The other thing that we would love to have feedback on is I think we should have more of these sessions with Brandon and Phil on a more regular basis, maybe like at least twice a year, so that we can, spend more time looking at all this information in detail. And then just quickly for Brandon and Phil, one of the questions that I have is what can faculty and researchers do, not just as researchers, but as citizens, to get involved in the process of influencing and providing feedback for all of these bills and through all of this process that ultimately affect the outcomes of funding for their research?
Yeah, so I can start with that and then I'll hand it over to Phil. But I think one of the most important things that we can do is talk about the value of the research that is happening and why that investment matters and why it should continue. And it essentially starts with the appropriations. That's why we spent so much time talking about what they're actually funding. And so to the extent that we can be able to share our stories with those decision makers, with those legislators, and help them really be able to articulate the value of that investment and the return on the investment, and to show them what their funding of NSF or NIH, what it translates to and what we're able to do with that. That is so important in terms of continuing that funding stream and making sure that those funding opportunities exist in the future. And that's something we really want to help you on. So if you are getting federally funded research, there's an opportunity to share your story with Congress. And a lot of it too is we want to make sure that they're making informed decisions, right? And so it's incumbent upon us to share the most up-to-date research and information that we have so that when they're back there making decisions and writing laws, that they're doing it in the best possible way. And so to the extent that we can share our story and really drill down and articulate the value and the return of that investment, it's only going to grease the wheels moving forward for further congressional investment. So that's something that I really just want to hammer home. And, you know, use us, reach out to me, reach out to Phil, and we will help you connect with Congress, connect with the agencies to be able to tell that story, to be able to share the good work that you're doing and really close the loop on that investment and make sure that that funding continues.
Yeah, and I don't have anything more to add than Brandon already covered email, but I did want to make sure because I thought it was an important question in the chat from Ralph Green with regard to opportunities that have perhaps been in limbo. Great example. Please reach out to your program manager if it was in limbo, if there was a question of whether or not it was, you are, not quite there, as far as your score, but now with appropriations or you're in limbo because the funding wasn't enough funding. Great opportunity to reach out to the program managers and to see if that money can actually flow now. Sorry. I thought it was an important question that I thought needed to be covered.
Well, we're a little bit over time, and I really want to thank our participants for staying after 11:30 and to our wonderful speakers. I think we definitely want to organize another one of these in a few months to get some updates on what's going on. And please do contact me, Meg, or Marjani. We're all in the participant list. If you have suggestions for the forum, if you have questions, if we can help you in any way, connect you with Brandon, Phil, or any of the information that they shared today, we're happy to assist you. We will see you after spring break. We have a very interesting session looking at the research at the intersection of public health and international trade. So that's going to be on April 8th. We're going to start sending information, but we get a break and we will see you after spring break. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you all.
Thanks all. Go Ags.